let's go through what we're looking to see from some of these quarterbacks here at the Combine, Buck, and we can kind of we can work off your list. I know you just pumped out your top 5, which folks can find NFL.com/Bucky Brooks. You can find all Bucky's lists there of his top 5 quarterbacks. So why don't you start us off, Buck? We'll work through your top 5 and talk about what you think we need to see from these guys at the Combine.
Well, obviously the biggest news in my top 5 list, I had Tua Tagovailoa at the top of the charts. And DJ, I think the big thing for Tua, obviously you won't get a chance to see him work out. I think what may be lost on the outside when it comes to the Tua conversation and evaluation is the kid, is the character part of it that will blow people away when he sits across from them. We all have talked about sitting in the room, and when the guy walks in the room, you can just tell. They captivate the room. Everyone is kind of sitting on the edges of their seat listening to them. They have a commanding presence, one that you can tell will radiate in the locker room. I think Tua has that. And so we won't get a chance to physically see him, but evaluators will get a chance to meet him. And yes, they'll track the progress of the hip and kind of see where that is, but they will really get a chance to see, hey, who is this guy? Where is he at in terms of his football IQ and his development, his character? Can we envision him being the leader of our franchise? Could we trust him to be the CEO of the brand? And I think the more people get to know him, the more the conversation is going to shift like, hey, wait a minute, like we were really high on Tua for most of the year, coming into the year, the middle of the season. Yes, he's had a series of injuries, but let's not just kind of completely dismiss him in terms of being QB1 potentially in this draft.
I think people expect you, in order for you to be a Tua guy or a Burrow guy, you've got to trash the other one. And that's just not the case, man. To me, it's these two guys. There is a significant gap after them before you get to the next group of quarterbacks. That's where the cutoff is. So, as we go up to the draft, Bucky's is Tua over Burrow. I have Burrow over Tua. I'm not going to sit here and fight with you, Buck, because I really like Tua. There's a lot of things I really like about his game. The durability kind of is the tiebreaker for me, and that's why I go in the other direction with Burrow. But man, there's a lot to like about Tua's game. And I wrote down, when I was taking my notes from my paper and putting it in the computer, the first thing I wrote down is that, to me, the image that sticks out in my mind is as a card dealer. If you've ever sat at a table or whatever and seen a professional card dealer, just how fast they just flip those cards all the way around the table, Buck, that's Tua. That's how he plays the game, with that quickness and just the ball just out right now. And that's how he does it. He doesn't have to push the ball 60 yards down the field every snap. Read it, identify it, get it out, boom, 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 boom. That's kind of how he plays the game.
It's funny that you said that, right? I host my radio show over the weekend, and one of the things, like my co-host asked, he said, hey, well, who does he kind of compare to? I said, well, when you see him physically, he is built like Russell Wilson, and his demeanor is probably a little more Russell-like than most. However, he plays the game in a manner that reminds you of Drew Brees. And so if you're an evaluator and I throw those two names out in a meeting, you're going to look around and be like, well, I'll sign up for that. I'll sign up for that all day if I get a combination of Russell Wilson and Drew Brees. And so, look, I think he's a terrific player. The biggest thing is going to be the health concerns. And everyone is going to say this. And this comment will kind of cloud both of the evaluations in terms of Tua and Joe Burrow. They play with 5-star playmakers on the outside. They got all these receivers and whatever. And I'll say this. Great teams have great players. There's a reason why Alabama's always in the mix. There's a reason why LSU won a national championship. There's a reason why Trevor Lawrence at Clemson has guys around him. Championship caliber teams have championship caliber players more than just at one spot. And so it's one of those things where you're going to be challenged when you're doing the evaluation to be able to project those throws and see, can he make tight window throws? Can he throw with touch timing and anticipation? How does his game translate to the league when everything is sped up and a little faster? And I'll say with both of these guys, Tua and Joe Burrow, both of their games translate really, really well to the league.
All right, you mentioned Burrow next there, Buck. What do you want to see there?
Look, man, this is a great player. And I don't know what Joe Burrow is going to do, but I think coming in, he's already checked off so many boxes that you look for in a franchise quarterback. Tough, athletic, competitive, high football IQ, great vision player. He is a guy, obviously, where people are talking about him being an all-state basketball player. I think that served him well. I think he plays the game like a John Stockton in his heyday, like just a distributor, playmaker, leader, does all of those things. The biggest thing, and he won't be able to answer for it now, is just getting around him and being able to say, hey, man, your game really went from 5 to 10 your senior season. What would you attribute that to? And let him talk about the development, the personal development that he had, and then let him weave in, hey, Joe Brady, this offense, I had mastery of the offense, how we played, the people around. I just would like to hear that conversation, because I think that conversation will really lead you to believe, look, Joe Burrow can take what he did at LSU, and that will continue to work well in the National Football League. And I think so much of it is like when you're making this debate and conversation between Tua and Burrow, and you talk about the one-year production, and people may hear that and say, oh, you're saying he's a one-year wonder. No, you're not saying that. You just – like if you have to have questions for all these guys, you just kind of want to know, well, what was the difference in your junior year and your senior year? Why did it pop? Why did it explode so much for you? And then just hear it.
The interesting thing about the Tua and Burrow discussion is we talked about it the other day with Burrow having thrown more passes in college than Tua, almost 300, I think, more attempts.
Yeah.
So he's played football. He's played some football. And the interesting thing is, if you kind of look at both being with great players, which would be, accepted by everybody, like you mentioned, Buck, I think if you looked at their performance against the top-tier competition, because their teams are so good, 60% of the schedule for for LSU and for Alabama, they're just going to be so much better than everybody they play against. But when they played against better competition, I think those numbers steer and stack a little bit in Joe Burrow's favor, even though we can see they're both playing with great players. But he had a lot of quality games against quality competition, whereas some of these other quarterbacks, when you're looking at them, go with an Eason or, if you look at the whole list of other guys, Jordan Love, they might have played against 3 or 4 quality opponents during their career. This guy played against 7 or 8 of them in 1 year.
Look, what Joe Burrow did this year was nothing short of remarkable. It can be safely categorized as maybe the greatest season that we've ever seen a college football player have in history. The amount of top 10 teams that they took down, who he played against, how he dominated them, what they looked like when you watched the tape. Look, he took his game up a notch. And I will say this, the maturity that he displayed, obviously he's a fifth-year player, so he's been around. You're talking about 22, 23 years old. Just from a cognitive standpoint, it should put you in a position to be a leader to handle those moments, and he did. And so I don't know how you can take that away from him. He's just a really, really good football player, a guy who should have tremendous success in the National Football League. And I think when it comes down to these two guys, it's unfortunate they won't be able to go toe-to-toe in terms of at the combine. It's really just a matter of, and I've said this comparison, I said it's a matter of Tony Romo and Drew Brees from a stylistic standpoint. Like, what would you prefer to have as your QB1? And I don't think you can go wrong with either player. It's just a matter of who do you envision being your quarterback of the next 10 years.
No doubt. All right, who do you got going down through this list here?
So, look, next is Justin Herbert. And we talked about Justin Herbert a little bit, like coming from the Senior Bowl. I think the big thing for Justin Herbert, can people get comfortable with the what appears to be a very quiet persona? Like, he seems to be kind of introverted. Can his personality work in an NFL locker room? I think having been around him at the Senior Bowl, look, he played well. I think he did himself well by being around there. He won MVP. He played well, but more importantly, when you watched him interact with teammates, watched him lead, watched him practice, I think you come away with a better sense of who he is. I think this guy's talented, and I think the thing that he can answer. I kind of want to know the up and down performances against big teams. We talked about the Auburn game. We talked about some of the other moments that he has had last year in the bowl game. Didn't necessarily play his best. So which Justin Herbert is going to show up in the National Football League? Through conversations, I would like to get to know him a little better so I can get a better sense of like how he's built, how he's constructed, what is this football character like, and how is that character going to be conveyed to his teammates.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about Justin Herbert when you talk about the size, the mobility, the arm strength. There's some wow throws. You saw some design quarterback run game, what he can do there. I went back and rewatched the SC game the other day.
Yeah.
He was more aggressive with his legs in that one. The opportunity to present itself, take it and go. Wanted to see a little bit more of that throughout his career than maybe we saw, especially this year. There's some, in terms of what are you looking for at the combine, there's a couple mechanical things that I put down here that I really want to keep an eye on, watch him throw, because sometimes his front shoulder flies open, and when that happens, his accuracy suffers in a big way, and you'll have some bad misses. So can you keep your front shoulder tucked in? That's one thing. And number two, and it's almost a feel thing, but when I watch him, I wrote down several times, like, he's guiding the football. Just let it rip, man. Just throw it. And he's trying to guide it, trying to make a perfect throw instead of just throwing the ball. And when he does that, it kind of affects and impacts his touch. So, I want to see that. Just let it rip. Don't guide the football. Keep your front shoulder in. Don't fly open, and let's see, how he throws the football, because the velocity is going to be there, Buck. He's got a huge arm. We know he's a really good athlete. He's a 4+ student, in terms of 4.0+ student. He's phenomenal in terms of his intelligence. So I want to see a more consistent thrower. And the one thing we can't see at the combine is I just want to see an overall more aggressive attacking style and demeanor on the field, and that's something we're not going to get to see in Indy.
No, it's funny. So you brought up a couple of things that stand out to me. You talked about him feeling like he's guiding the ball, like he didn't let it go. And DJ, in my experience, sometimes when you have high IQ players and athletes, because they want to succeed and they want everything to be perfect, it's hard for them to kind of cut it loose and just kind of play freely. Whereas when you look at Joe Burrow and you look at even Tua, like, man, they just kind of rip it. They just kind of play. They play through their mistakes. They don't worry about it. And I would like to get around Justin and just know, hey, man, look, it's okay to have a mistake. And I think for Justin Herbert more than any other person, I believe the coach and who is directly in touch with him at the next level matters. His quarterback coach, his head coach, particularly if it's a head coach that's offensive playmaker, what is their personalities like? Because I'm not saying this as a knock for Justin Herbert, but I believe he needs a nurturer more so than a hard-nosed, grinded-out coach. I think a nurturer –
more carrot than stick.
Yeah, I think a nurturer would kind of bring that out in him. And I think you'll see him blossom. I think if you have one of those hard-nosed, grizzled guys that is kind of on him, whacking his hand with the ruler every day, I think that doesn't play to the strong parts of his personality. And I don't know if we'll ever see him unlock his full potential and his game.
No doubt. All right, who's next, Buck?
After that, I had Jordan Love. And part of the fascination, I believe, with Jordan Love stems from what we call the Pat Mahomes bounce. You and I sat here a few years ago when Pat Mahomes came in. We had him top 5s, top 50 lists. Like, we weren't sure on what he would be. In fact, I found a clip at the Combine when Pat Mahomes was coming out. I'm like, hey, he's a sandlot player. I don't know if I've ever seen this work in the league. I mean, look, it's a bad comparison now, but I compared him to Jay Cutler in terms of how he played. When I saw Jay Cutler play at Vanderbilt, Jay Cutler had to take a cast of no-names and kind of do everything, and he was very reckless with the football. The Pat Mahomes that I watched at Texas Tech was kind of like that. I say that because when I look at Jordan Love, here's an interesting thing. What if Jordan Love's years were flipped, DJ? Meaning that the way that he performed this year was last year, and the way that he performed last year was this year. What would that conversation be?
Be a top 10 pick.
Right. So now, as an evaluator, do you look at the entire body of work? How do you characterize the previous year compared to this year? Like, how much weight do you put into that when the circumstances were different, who was around him, and the like? Because maybe I'm low on him just based on the way that he finished up his career. Maybe if we go back and look at everything and really study everything, maybe he does deserve to be up there with Herbert. Maybe he deserves to be ahead of Herbert. Like, he's talented. It's just a matter of sequencing the years to understand who he is and what he is.
Here's the thing. If you like Justin Herbert, or if you like Jordan Love, you are making the comparison to Mahomes.
Yep.
And you're saying you reverse the years, and that's what you're running with. And the 2018 is the real Jordan Love, and we're going to get the next Pat Mahomes. If you're not a Jordan Love guy, you're saying, oh my gosh, this is DeShone Kizer all over again. He might have given you some hope earlier on in his career, but we saw what he was at the end, and he tried to tell you who he was. You got to believe him. So that's the two edges of the spectrum here that we're talking about. I wrote down just the hero ball, Buck. He was so impressive in 18, and then the turnovers came in bunches. Obviously lost 9 starters, head coach, offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of reasons for that. When you see the skills, he's fluid and loose, explosive. The ball jumps out of his hand. He makes these off-platform throws that are incredible. And I've been Love over Herbert. They're riding next to each other. I got a lot more I want to dig into and study with these two before I eventually make that final call before we get to the draft. It's a marathon and not a sprint here, Buck. But I'll tell you what, it's challenging my courage because I just went through and did all the linebackers for the Combine. And so I spent 2 or 3 days just plowing through all the guys I hadn't done yet and knocked out linebackers. And got to one, and I said, whoa, nice interception versus Jordan Love. I write that in my notes. I can talk about that at the Combine. He picked off Jordan Love. 3 linebackers later, nice little pick there on Jordan Love. I make sure I talk about this. And then after about the 3rd or 4th time I saw it, I said, this is not an accomplishment. Everybody that they played against got interceptions against this dude. So it is challenging my courage and conviction as an evaluator when you're going and doing all these defensive players and you see all these picks and then you see drop picks. The turnovers, we see it with a guy like Jameis, right? Those turnovers. You see it even with Darnold. I love Sam Darnold, but some of those issues he had have carried over in terms of some of the turnovers. That stuff sticks with you. So, I want to believe that 2018 is the real version, but I can't. 2019 is still there. You can't divorce yourself from that.
Yeah, it's funny, and I think it's tough. DJ, like what's interesting about it, and it would be great, and maybe this is an exercise that I'll do, but if I could play matchmaker with quarterback and coach. Because a lot of Pat Mahomes' success, I would say, can be directly attributed to Andy Reid. Not necessarily that Andy Reid deserves all of the credit for Pat Mahomes' success, but what Andy Reid has been able to do. He coached Pat Mahomes into playing winning football. And of all the quarterbacks in NFL history, Pat Mahomes has the 3rd lowest interception rate. He's right behind Aaron Rodgers, who's first, and Tyrod Taylor is actually second. But Pat Mahomes learned how to harness some of the gunslinger and to avoid some of the hero ball. With Jordan Love, I would want to know how amenable is he to being able to play winning football? Can he turn down the extra cookie that is hanging on the shelf and be like, no, I don't want the cookie. I'm going to go get a piece of fruit because I don't want my sweet tooth to pack on a couple more pounds. If he can do that, if he can avoid those hero moments that lead to turnovers while still retaining some of that aggressiveness and assertiveness from the pocket, you could be unlocking a potential superstar at the position. I'm not calling him Pat Mahomes, but I do see enough of him to say, look, I can envision this guy being a player who plays at a high level in the league and kind of has us wondering, man, why didn't we take him sooner? Next one that I had on my list was Jacob Eason from University of Washington.
Yeah.
Eason is interesting because when it comes to the physical traits, he has it all. Like, he has a big arm. A tremendous arm. He can make all the throws that you want to see. Very, very talented. Arguably one of the more talented, if not the most talented player in the class. But what you see is inconsistencies in terms of the accuracy, inconsistent performance. Look, he didn't have a lot around him at UW this year. You also have to go back and try and figure out how come he couldn't fend off Jake Fromm at Georgia. But from a talent perspective, he's intriguing. He's enticing. And I can see a team that already has a quarterback in place pulling the trigger on Jacob Eason and trying to develop just a little bit more before he becomes a starter for a team.
Yeah, he is a big, strong pocket passer who makes some. You talk about wow throws. He has got a huge arm. And there's some games you watch, the Oregon game, Utah, he played pretty well in that one as well. Good competition. He played really well. Then you watch like the Stanford game and some other games, and you just kind of left scratching your head. The touch and the anticipation are 2 areas he's got to improve on. Now, I don't know how much at the Combine you're going to get to see that because he's working with all these receivers he doesn't know. The arm strength will be evident. You'll see that jump off. But just being able to layer the ball, touch the ball up a little bit, not everything hard and flat, that's going to be a challenge for him. And the other thing I would say is he's got some bad habits pocket movement-wise. He tries to spin out of everything. You never want to turn your back on the defense unless it's absolutely necessary. He does it all the time. So some of those drills you see guys climb up, move around the pocket. I want to see how comfortable he is kind of getting off his spot and then throwing the football.
I don't know if you can improve touch and anticipation. I don't know if you can do it. I think it may be one of those situations where a coach can help you by creating bigger windows, meaning play action. You're able to kind of mask, like guys who have problems with touch and anticipation. What you can do is you can be a real heavy play action team, so the windows are bigger, so they're throwing to these huge voids rather than having to kind of like throw guys open. And maybe you can do some of that, but with the systems that are being run today, the teams that kind of use those things, Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, San Francisco 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo, your quarterback has to be mobile enough to kind of get outside and do some of those things so you can always change the spot. So Jacob Eason's athleticism will need to come up big. He needs to show that he's a mobile athlete. And as you talked about, the escapability and some of those climb and escape drills, he has to show that he's light enough on his feet to be able to do things when the pocket collapses, and he won't just kind of be a sitting duck, that you have to have a fortress in front of him or he's non-functional.
I want you to rip through your top 5 receivers, kind of what we're looking for here.
Here we go. Jerry Jeudy is at the top of the list, and I think there'll be some debate because I think this year, unlike any other year, man, you can kind of throw all these guys around, and depending on what you're looking for, it makes sense. Jerry Jeudy is my guy number one because I think he's the cleanest route runner of all of the guys. I think his ability to get in and out of his routes, his ability to kind of put some magic sauce on his routes will enable him to continue to play well at the next level. I think he's fast enough to do the things that you want to see in the vertical game. I think he's tough enough to catch the ball going over the middle. And because he's a refined route runner, I think he can be a natural number one receiver in any offense.
Elite route runner. To me, the debate between Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, I have Lamb one spot over. Lamb gets the edge when you talk about run after catch with the physicality. Lamb's a little bit better on the 50-50 balls. Jerry Jeudy's better off the line. Jerry Jeudy better overall route runner, creates more separation. After the catch, he's more of a slippery, elusive type. I thought Jeudy did have some concentration drops, Buck, which I just want to see a nice, clean combine from him catching the football. But it's whatever you want. You want somebody that's Stephon Diggs, who Jerry Jeudy to me reminds me a lot of a Stephon Diggs with that just polished route running. He's outstanding. CeeDee Lamb's going to be in more contested situations, which can be difficult. So, that's kind of what you're looking for here stylistically. I think they're both outstanding.
Yeah, they're both outstanding. CeeDee Lamb kind of reminded me a little bit of Nuke Hopkins because Nuke Hopkins doesn't have elite, what we call world-class speed, but look, it doesn't matter if you have guys draped all over him. He is always open because he is such a weapon. He's so comfortable winning the 50-50 balls. I think CeeDee Lamb is like that, plus he gives you that physical toughness that you look for in the run after catch part of the game. Look, both of these guys are terrific. I think it comes down to styles. What style do you want at that position? So we talked about those two guys. The next guy for me was Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs from Alabama is really interesting because he has gas, man. He can run. He can do a lot of interesting things with the ball in his hands. I like the way that he plays. It's just amazing to me that Alabama had 3 guys on the field that could just make it happen from anywhere on the field. And sometimes that can kind of dim each player's light. But when you look at Ruggs, man, I think Ruggs is not necessarily a number 1 receiver. I think he is a high-end number 2 receiver, meaning that you play opposite someone that's kind of that big body guy, but he brings the vertical element and some of that other stuff. He's a terrific player, terrific prospect.
We've talked about kind of the idea of reverse engineering in terms of who are the good players in a draft, and maybe asking defensive coaches to look at offensive players, ask offensive coaches to look at defensive players. And I just have a feeling if you gave this stack of receivers to defensive coordinators around the league and said, who do you not want in your division, I got a feeling Henry Ruggs would be the first person they would list. They don't want to deal with that. You don't want to have to deal with that speed, man. That's a problem. That is a problem for defenses, and he's going to be somebody. I think he's got a chance at the combine. We're going to see he's going to be 4.2 something. I think he's got a chance to get underneath John Ross. We'll see if he can get down there. He's just it's stupid. It's ridiculous speed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous speed, and you're right. The reason why defensive coordinators and defensive players don't want to have to deal with a guy like Ruggs is because his speed leads to explosive plays, and we have seen how big plays impact scoring. And so when you have a guy that can produce these chunk plays, these 40-plus yard plays at a moment's notice, it is really, really difficult. It changes the way that you have to defend them. You got to keep a safety over top. It loosens the box. And so Henry Ruggs, for a team that has a running threat, like a true running back, like the Dallas Cowboys, he would be terrific because he would stretch. He would make you pull that safety out of the box, create more running lanes for Ezekiel Elliott. Look, he's a factor. He's a weapon, man. I just love watching him on tape.
No doubt. What do you got next?
Laviska Shenault from Colorado. And Laviska is different than all of these other guys. I think what Laviska is, I mean, look, we talk about shooters and scorers in wide receiver terms. He's a scorer because there's nothing about his game that is really refined or polished. Like, he's not a polished route runner. He's not necessarily a polished or a textbook pass catcher. But what he is, he's dangerous when he has the ball in his hands. And your job as an offensive coordinator, when you take on a Laviska Shenault, how can we get him the ball 8 to 10 times a game? Is that, A, let's get it to him on some fly sweeps. A, let's put him in the Wildcat. Let's throw some hitches out there, some bubble screens. A few weeks ago, we talked about the wingback. What is the wingback, the reincarnation of the wingback after watching Deebo Samuel? When I look at Laviska Shenault, he can do the same things that Deebo Samuel does for an offense.
I agree with you. I actually wrote down, in terms of a comparison coming out of college, Demaryius Thomas, because Demaryius Thomas, we didn't know how refined he was going to be, coming out of Georgia Tech. We just knew this guy's just an athletic marvel. I mean, he's such an athletic dude. He's so big and strong and fast. You're just going to figure it out. And I think that's kind of the same theory here with Shenault.
No, it is the same thing. Get the ball in his hands, let him do work. He is physical, he's tough, he has a lot of traits that you like. I think he fits in a lot of offense, but I think he comes with some instructions. You have to know how to utilize him. If you think you're getting a pure receiver, a pure route runner, I think you might be a little disappointed. I don't think he has the skills and the tools like a Jerry Jeudy in terms of running routes, but I do believe he has impact potential, which is why you like him.
Who we got next?
T. Higgins. T. Higgins is number 5 on my list, and T. Higgins is there because he's the next big-bodied playmaker to have success. And when I talk about big body, I'm not talking about big physical body. I'm talking about a stretch. 6'4", has length, has the ability to kind of take it off the top of the backboard. You can throw those alley-oops to him along the sideline. Should be a red zone threat while also being a vertical threat. May not be the toughest when it comes to crossing the middle of the field, but guess what? Don't ask him to go across the middle of the field. Keep him on the outside. He'll be fine. I think he's one of those playmakers that, look, we have seen Ted Ginn Jr. make a living in this league being the vertical stretch player. T. Higgins can do a lot of that. Gives you just a bigger package.
No, he's interesting. There's a real strong debate in draft rooms around the league about him because when you watch him against some of that better competition at the end of the year, he struggled to separate, struggled to get off the line. So that's going to be the challenge there. I do know he was hopefully going to be working with T.J. Houshmandzadeh, was supposed to be on the way out to California to work with him from visiting with that training facility the other day. But man, he's a really, really athletic, above the rim. You're hoping you're drafting A.J. Green when you draft him. I mean, that's kind of what you're envisioning and hoping that he can be.
I feel like we've talked about these running backs for a while, but we'll start. DeAndre Swift is the top running back for me, and I think the thing when I look at Swift is he's the natural. He can do anything and everything that you want to see at the position. He can catch it. He can run it. He has a toughness to kind of finish runs between the tackles. He can get to the perimeter, catches the ball out the backfield, and I think he's solid in pass protection. To me, he's my number 1 guy.
I have him as the top running back too, Buck. Compact, patient, excellent vision, quickness, elusiveness. He'll drop his shoulder. More of kind of a cradle catcher than a natural hands catcher, but still he's functional in the passing game. I compared him, just when I looked at him size-wise and skill set-wise, Buck, I compared him to a guy you were around in D'Angelo Williams. I'd love to get your thoughts on that one.
Ooh, that is a really good comparison, man. D'Angelo Williams was one of those guys coming out of Memphis when we drafted him. He kind of did everything. He was kind of like a wildcat quarterback for Memphis during his final year there, and he was tough enough, could catch it. Just smooth, man. Just sneaky, could chop it up like we used to always talk about it, the pitter pat. Can you see their feet just kind of dance around or whatever? He has that. Now, when I look at DeAndre Swift, man, he has that pitter pat to get in and out of holes and make breaks and make these jump cuts and all this stuff. He can sequence it and put it together. He's impressive.
All right, who we got next?
Let's go. Edward Salar from LSU.
Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah, Edward Solar to me is really, really impressive, man. DJ, I think this is kind of underreported. He had 50 receptions, 50-plus receptions his final season at LSU. The way the game is trending, if you have a running back that can catch the ball out the backfield, it gives you a chance to have a true 3-down running back. He has that. He's not going to light it up, and so I'm glad that you put those numbers out, 4.52. Because, man, I think he may be 4.58, 4.59, maybe 4.62, but it doesn't matter to me. When I look at him, I think of the young Frank Gore that played in San Francisco. Frank Gore that toted the rock and was physical and was tough and was amongst the top rushers in the league while also catching the ball out the backfield. That's what I see when I see Edward Solar.
Can I give you my 2 comps here, Buck? Because I was proud of myself on these 2 comps.
All right.
Old school, he's Priest Holmes.
Ooh.
So he reminds me of. I have a chance to see him a lot in
Baltimore.
He had already left, but he was in Kansas City, and we were both really good teams during that time period, and he's a problem. But same body type, same value in the passing game, just guys you can't get on the ground with their strength. And then the other one that I put down is a guy that I see every week doing the Charger games, and that's Austin Eckler. With how they use him in the passing game, you can do the same exact thing with this kid. He is short, compact. His football intelligence is off the charts. Awareness and pass pro. Catch the ball. You can line him up anywhere. Incredible leg drive, break tackles. Talked to Joe Burrow the other day. I think I mentioned this. He said, man, you're at Ohio State. You're at LSU. Who's the best player you've ever been around? Who's the best teammate you've had? Who would you take with you? Who's the guy? He said Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the best football player I've ever played with.
Wow.
And he did not stutter.
Wow. That goes a long way. He is a terrific player. And I think the guy that's right behind him for me, I mean, you can flip it however you want it. I think J.K. Dobbins is just as impressive as a player. And we talked about the stretch run that he had at Ohio State. I don't know if people really paid attention to it, but the last 6-7 games at Ohio State, he showed people that he could be a workhorse. Tough, physical, has the ability to make these nice cuts inside. He can create, which is very, very important to me for running backs, meaning that it doesn't always have to be a clean hole for him to get 4+ yards. His ability to stop, start, stick his head down and be able to kind of power through some contact is impressive. And then it's really just a matter of how can he be utilized in the passing game. I think the big thing is when you're looking at running backs in today's game, they have to be functional plus in the passing game if they really want to be considered like these every down backs. Just kind of want to see how he catches the ball at the combine. I want to see how natural it is for him.
Yeah, a couple drops in that Clemson game, but really you go through the rest of the tape, I thought his hands were reliable. He's really good in pass protection, no hesitation. He's got power, balance, inside, outside runner. Just a really good football player. And I have him right now in my last update. I have him as my second running back, and it's a debate between him and Edwards-Helaire for me. Interesting, you have them right together. I'm going to end up having them right together as well. I think they're both really, really good, solid football players.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're looking for. You're running back. You want someone who's rock solid, dependable, reliable, and tough. He has that. The fourth guy for me is probably a surprise for a lot of people, but Cam Akers from Florida State, to me, I think the more we go through the process, the more I believe he'll kind of rise. When I look at Cam Akers, I think it's his explosiveness, his elusiveness in tight areas, his ability to be able to make things happen on the perimeter. I think he's going to catch the ball better than most people imagine. He's just a really, really good football player. I think he kind of got lost in the muck that was Florida State football, but this is what I believe a pro running back. He plays it like a pro, and I think he's going to have a tremendous amount of success in the league.
We talked about it when we did our tiers with running backs the other day. I mean, he's up there. He's up there in that tier. He's somebody you're going to hear. The buzz will build. The buzz will build as we get to the combine. As more people start to really do their homework and watch this kid, he's big time. He is a big time talent. And to the point where I wouldn't be shocked if when it's all said and done, Cam Akers was the second running back picked. Like, it would not shock me at all if he ended up in that range. He's got that type of ability. You see him do the Wildcat stuff, Buck.
Play quarterback in high school, man.
Power, downhill. Yeah, there you go. There you go. But he's patient. He'll press and bounce. He's just got a really good feel. He's a little slippery inside. I love his overall game. The only question that I had, there's some misassignments in pass protection that you got to get cleaned up a little bit. You got to do a little work there on his mental, make sure that he understands what goes on in pass protection, because I had a little bit of a question mark there, especially like the Notre Dame game. But overall, he's gifted.
Yeah, he is gifted. And then the last guy, I have Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. The production speaks for itself. Look, man, he 2,000 plus yards, caught the ball more this year than he had in previous years. Like, just really, really solid all around. I think you may want maybe a better athlete. I don't think his numbers are going to wow anybody, but look, man, he's just kind of steady Eddie, just productive, finishes, physical. He does it, and he's been able to carry a heavy workload. To me, I think it speaks not only to your endurance physically, but your mental endurance, because it's tough to be a grinder when you get nailed play after play after play.
Yeah, I wrote down production, speed, and strength. I mean, he's more sudden than shifty, and you'll see when he gets out in the open field, he's gone. I mean, he's got big-time top speed, but just not a lot of wiggle, not a lot of make you miss. In the pass game, going to be more involved in the screen game than really kind of putting him out in the route. I think that's where he's most comfortable, and just doesn't get a lot of reps in pass protection at Wisconsin. They don't do it very often, so he's usually getting out. So that's going to be an area where he needs to get some more reps, some more experience. But man, if you can block it up and he hits crease, he's gone, man.
Yeah, no, he is, and it'll be fun to watch. But DJ, we've talked about the running backs, and people have been so successful being able to find guys outside of those upper stages. I kind of want to touch on some of the guys that I like that won't be day one or even maybe day two picks. The first guy that stands out to me is Zach Moss, running back from Utah, and he's just a pro, man. I just wrote down in my notes, I was like, man, this is a pro running back. From the way that he toasts the rock, the way that he finishes runs, the physicality and toughness that he displays when he's playing against Pac-12 opponents, catching it out the backfield. There's not much that he can't do. And so I just believe he fits. And if you're one of those teams that kind of subscribes to the theory, hey, man, we will pick and choose later on. We'll wait to day 3 or the 4th round to kind of find our running back. Man, if I was doing that, I have stars all around Zach Moss, because he is someone that I think will go outside the first round but could be, man, a 1,300-yard back for a team.
Yeah, teams trying to pair up running backs. A lot of teams doing committees, and that's just the way the future is. And a lot of teams that have that speed back, they're going to love Zach Moss. I compared him to James Conner. That's who he reminds me of when he was coming out of Pitt. Obviously been a good player there with the Steelers. I think he's got a chance to go maybe a little bit higher than people think there, because a lot of teams that have that faster guy covet this type of running style. The list goes on and on. It's whatever flavor you want, man. Those two positions, the wide receiver position and the running back position, if you have a need, you're going to enjoy this combine, because there's going to be a lot of guys that can help your football team.
Yeah, a lot of guys that can be productive, a lot of guys that can contribute and help right away. Should be fun, man. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing all these guys. Skill guys get a chance to perform early on in prime time. Should be a lot of fun.